300, 400, 500, today on Sunday Baseball.
Once again, it's Sunday Baseball. Here's Indy Nidell.
You know what's a good season? Hitting 300, that's a pretty good season. Now, I know that lately people don't think so much of batting average, and sure, you have big hitters years when there's a lot of 300 hitters, but as a general rule, hitting 300, that's a pretty good season. You know what makes that season better? A 400 on-base percentage. That would make that season much better. 300 average, 400 on-base percentage, and if you really wanted to make it a fantastic world-class season, you could throw in a 500 slugging percentage. Now that is a beautiful season.
You could tip your hat to that.
Indeed. And if you could keep that up for an entire career, now that would be a hell of a career. In fact, there are only 23 players in baseball history that have managed to have a 300 batting average, 400 on-base percentage, and 500 slugging percentage for their entire career. And all of them are either Hall of Famers or likely Hall of Famers, but I'm not going to talk about them today. Today is dedicated to those heroes who had a 300, 400, 500 line during their final seasons in the big leagues. And there aren't that many, actually. Since 1871, there have only been 2 players that have had that line in their final season with more than 500 plate appearances. One of them was Shoeless Joe Jackson, who in 1920 hit .382, had a .444 on-base percentage, and slugged .589, and was out of baseball the very next year. However, Jackson didn't choose to retire. He was banned from baseball for life because of the Black Sox scandal, which is a definite topic for another day. Hey, you want to know something cool? I saw this sign in a second-hand shop window while walking down the street in Stockholm. True story. The only other player to have a final season like this with more than 500 plate appearances is, you'll never guess, Will Clark.
Never would have guessed that.
Now, Will Clark got a lot of cred early in his career, but he was always kind of unfairly neglected in the 90s because he was no longer hitting 20-plus homers a year, and all the steroid guys were hitting like 50 or 60 homers a year. But Clark was a model of consistency. In his entire career, he never once had an OPS plus below 100, and even in his final season in the year 2000, hit .319, had an on-base percentage of .418, and slugged .546. So, kudos to Will Clark. If you lower the requirements to 400 plate appearances, you get a few more guys. For starters, you get Big Dave Orr. Now, Big Dave Orr was a big fat fatty who could hit the ball like a demon. He retired after the 1890 season, in which he hit .371, had a .414 on-base percentage, and slugged .534.
.371? Why did he retire?
Because he suffered a career-ending stroke after the 1890 season at the tender age of 30, because he was a big fat fatty. But in his 7 full seasons, he never once finished below 5th in the league in hitting, retired with a .341 lifetime batting average, and still holds the single-season right-handed hitting record for triples in a season with 31.
31 triples?
The thing is, back then, the way the games were played and the parks were built, triples were a lot more common than home runs, which were usually of the inside-the-park variety anyhow. However, a lot of Orr's triples would have actually been home runs, but he was so fat and slow, he would stop on third base because he would run out of gas.
Big fat fatty.
Who else is in this club? Dave Nielsen's in this club, a catcher no less, and the first Australian to play in the All-Star game. Dave's last season was 1999 with the Brewers, when he hit .309, had a .400 on-base percentage, and slugged .554. Now, he was only 29 years, so you'd think he'd have a lot more good seasons in him, and you'd be right. Dave left Major League Baseball after 1999 to play in Japan, so he would be eligible to play for Australia in the 2000 Olympics, and he's been working with Australian baseball ever since then. If you lower the requirements just 10 plate appearances to 390, you get one of the all-time greats, and the only guy on this list who actually decided to retire other than Will Clark, Ted Williams. However, before we talk about Ted Williams, here's Swedish Knock Knock Girl.
Knock knock.
Who's there?
Wilbur.
Wilbur who?
Will burn in hell for this kind of humor. Knock knock.
Who's there?
Would.
Would who?
Would somebody stop this knock knock jokes?
Thank you, Swedish Knock Knock Girl, for turning my show into hee-haw. In 1960, the 41-year-old Ted Williams decided to close out his possibly the greatest hitter who ever lived career by hitting .316 with a .451 on-base percentage and slugging .645. He even hit a home run in his final career at-bat. He only had 390 plate appearances, right? But had he been up enough to qualify for the batting title, he would have finished second in the league by 4 points. But he would have led the league in on-base percentage and in slugging percentage, both by large margins, which is a very, very impressive swan song.
The man could hit.
Other than those 5 guys, though, that's basically it. You have to actually go down to below 200 plate appearances to get a couple more, one of which is Tony Longmire.
Who?
And the other one was Ken Williams, who was a legitimate star back in the 1920s. There's some real sadness on this list, you know? Like poor Dave Orr, struck down in his prime. Poor Shoeless Joe Jackson being banned from baseball in his prime. But There's also some great joy on this list, whether it's the subtle final hurrah of Will Clark or the 41-year-old Ted Williams out-hitting the entire league. Anyhow, here's a salute to those heroes who went 300, 400, 500 in their final years. Salute! That's all for today, but we'll see you next week on Sunday Baseball.
Knock knock.
Who's there?
The man.
Mantle who?
Man, to love this show, you don't even have to like baseball. No.
Maybe we should go back to Will for a while. For more cool baseball trivia and history, follow Sunday Baseball on Twitter. Sunday Baseball is shot every week at Larry's Corner in Stockholm, Sweden. You know what my favorite one is? Knock knock.
Who's there?
The interrupting cow.
The interrupting.
Moo!